Díomh go léir. So I'm like just back from Ireland, so I feel my accent is really good at this stage. and particularly if I speak a little as Gaeilge. You're also very welcome to the New York University Centre here. And as chairman of Solas Nua, my name is Paddy Meskel. And I'm delighted that Solas Nua and New York University are collaborating on presenting programming such as this to Washington, D.C., because our mission is to present the best of contemporary Irish art, but more and more we also want to collaborate with other artists in the city and around the city so that together we can enrich the cultural life of the city, which is a wonderful thing to do. I want to really thank the artists who have come here tonight and the performers who have come here tonight and given of your talents and your time and your energy, and we really appreciate it, and we really appreciate the fact that we're a non-profit and that the smallest fee we're paying is $5,000. Not. But we really appreciate it. Where does tonight's program fit into the overall program is called Home plus Discordance equals US. So home has traditionally been a word and an idea that communicates warmth and safety, embrace, love, acceptance, security, welcome. But for what's going on in the world today and all over the world and even here, that word home has now a discordant tone. And it doesn't convey for tens and tens and tens of millions of people, the same sense of safety and security that it has before. And politicians talk about it, and academicians talk about it, and historians talk about it. But I think artists have a particular view, and we all believe that artists have a way of looking at the world and observing the world that help us understand it at a deeper level. So I think it's wonderful that we have a group of artists, the visual art curated by Jackie Hoisted, a brilliant artist in her own right, and then the other artists that will be performing tonight to hear and see their observations of this concept of home. It begs questions. What is home? Where is home? Whose home is this? Leaving home, returning home, being at home, homeless. And these are some of the questions we will explore. So the purpose of tonight is not so much to give answers, but to maybe gain some new questions and some new insights and some new perspectives, and maybe walk away with a deeper empathy and a deeper understanding for those who are struggling with this concept of home. For me, the program tonight will be a combination of conversation with a panel and with yourselves in the audience, some music, some storytelling, and some poetry, and we'll play it as it goes. We won't have a break, so if anything calls, including nature, just do what you need to do. Oh yeah, as regards calling, if you wouldn't mind not using your cell phones, that would be grand entirely. For me and for Irish people and for Celtic people, the idea of home has three main dimensions: place, kinship, and ritual. So let me just kind of explain that to you as how it means to me. I came to the United States in 1988, and then I used to go home for a week or two every year. In 2010, I had what's called the widowmaker. I had this massive heart attack, and I was lucky to survive, and the good doctors and medical people in Washington Hospital Center fixed me. But they didn't heal me. I had to go home to heal. So I went home. And I went to my place, where I knew the fields, and the names of the fields, and the stones in the fields. And I knew the cries of the crows as they flew home in the evening. And I knew the cry of the curlew high in the sky, and the splash of the salmon, and the smell of new-mown hay, and how turf cut in a bog felt in your hands, and the breeze coming up the river. And I could feel that sense of oneness and belonging with place. And with my kin, my people, my tribe, their troubles and their histories and their joys, and I felt safe and secure with my people. And the rituals of singing in the pub and going to a hurling match and making hay as a community and shooting Canada geese at the crack of dawn on a crackling January night with my father, and fishing for salmon in June. And I stayed there for several months, and I got fixed and I got healed. So for me, home is a place of healing. It's a place I can always go back to and fix the pains or the hurts that the world has maybe caused me, or I might have even caused the world. So that for me is home. And for you, I'm sure home has its own dimensions and its own concepts. And for people on the panel and the performers and the audience, those are some of the things we will discuss tonight. What is home and where is home? But to remember that really I can never go back home. And when I even went back, I didn't go home. Because on the fields where I played, there's now housing developments. And in the local store, there's a wonderful section of Polish food. And the woman at the checkout is a wonderful young Nigerian woman. And friends have died. And mechanization now saves the turf. And there's no need anymore for communities to make hay because big tractors do it. I should have known, but living by a river, you can never step in the same river twice. So I have a memory of home and a longing for home. And Irish people have a B in the belonging. The B is to stay in the place where we were born and be close to our kin and our rituals and our place. And the longing is to travel and journey. And we have that tension between being and longing, the belonging. I would like to ask that as you listen to the discussion tonight, you will have gotten some notes or quotes from home. And if you don't mind, you might relate that to your discussion, to the quote you have in your pocket, or to the ideas you brought in with, and that will help us and maybe help us frame the discussion. I asked 5 people to take a special quote and read it out loud, and I won't give any microphone to do this, but I would first like to ask Chrissy, if you would mind just calling out as loud as you can, Chrissy, your brief quote on home and who had the quote.
Home isn't where you're from, it's where you find light when all grows dark. Pierce Brown.
Thank you, Chrissy. Lindsay.
Every day is a journey, and the journey itself is my home. From Satsuo Basho.
Thank you, Lindsay. Nissan.
I had crossed the line. I was free, but there was no one to welcome me to the land of freedom. I was a stranger in a strange land. Harriet Tubman.
Did everyone hear that? Thank you very much, Nissan. Dennis.
We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. T.S. Eliot.
Thank you, Dennis. Prem.
Perhaps home is not a place, but simply an irrevocable condition. James Baldwin.
Thank you very much, Prem. We have very talented and distinguished people in our panel, and we will, after a performance by Vijay Nathan, we will begin to discuss the conversation with the panel. But I would now like to ask you to welcome an incredible woman, to be honest with you, who I've just met, and in about 10 minutes I feel like I was under a therapist with all the questions she was asking me about home and what we were going to talk about. And so in that 10 minutes, an incredible experience. Vijay is one of the leading Indian American storytellers, writers, comedians. She's appeared in the Kennedy Center, at the Smithsonian Institute, at Constitution Hall, at the Library of Congress. She has performed in England, in Canada, and the United States. And I am delighted to invite her here to share her thoughts on home in her own inimitable and stylish way. Welcome, Vijay.
Okay. Hi. Can you guys hear me? Good? Okay, excellent. All right, this is going down. So I'm going to just take this out. So by round of applause, applaud if your family, your parents were born in another country.
in a different country? Okay. If you were born in a different country. Okay, if you were born here. Okay, I was born here too. All right. My parents came to this country from India in 1970, and they were really excited to come here. But there were certain American traditions that they didn't believe in, like freedom. That was pretty much number one. My parents were very, very strict with me and my two older sisters. My older sisters were born in India, and I was born here. But they were very, very strict while I was growing up. I'm gonna switch gears for a second, but do you guys watch Wheel of Fortune? Anybody here? Watch a few Wheel watchers? Okay. Oh, well, thank you for applauding. So my mom's favorite show is Wheel of Fortune, and it's very frustrating watching her try to solve the puzzles because English is not her first language. So the puzzle is the Great Wall of China. Every letter is up there except for the W in wall, and my mom can't figure it out. She's like, Great Hall of China? Great Ball of China? No, Great Mall of China. That's it. And I'm like, Ma, it is the Great Wall. Great Mall doesn't make any sense. She said, hey, everything is made in China. That must be the Great Mall of China. So she's thinking. So there are any other Hindus here? Woo! Hindu. Okay, Hindu party of two. I know, Prem. There was an Indian. I mean, you might not have been Hindu. You could have been other things, but thanks for your companion kind of forcing you to own up to it. Okay. So my parents were Hindu, and my oldest sister is a born-again Christian. Hold your applause. But my mom was very confused when my sister converted. She was like, why does she have to be born-again Christian? We are Hindu. We are born again and again and again. Makes sense. But growing up, we would go to the temple. We would go to the Hindu temple, and we would eat like the vegetarian yogurt rice that they served there. And immediately afterwards, we would head straight to McDonald's and get Big Macs. And it took me a few years to catch on that being Hindu meant I wasn't supposed to eat beef. And I said, Mommy, how can we be real Hindus if we're eating at McDonald's? And she said, Vijay, the cow is sacred. The bull is not. McDonald's pure bull. And I'm feeling she's right about that on some level. So my mother was also, she was very, very patriotic to India, very, very patriotic to India, and she is very angry still at the British for ever coming into India. And so she holds a grudge for a very long time. But that's why whenever we fly back to India, she goes on British Airways, just so she can boss British people around. She's like, excuse me, Whitney, there is no safety card in my seat pocket. Are you trying to kill me and all of the Indians on the plane? I'm watching you. She could be pretty scary. Growing up, I would ask my mom to tell me bedtime stories, tell me fairy tales. And she would tell me the Indian fairy tales, like, once upon a time, there was a little girl, she did everything her parents told her to do. The end. And I'm like, Mom, tell me the American ones. Like, I was like, I want to hear like the ones that I would see in Disney stuff. And she's like, look, Vijay, Snow White, mother, dead. Little Mermaid, mother, dead. Sleeping Beauty, mother, dead. Do you see a pattern here? Are you trying to kill me and all of the Indian mothers in America? I'm watching you. Scary lady. She's a bit scary. But where are my dads? I'm giving a lot of love to moms. Where are the dads? Applaud if you have a K. Okay. My dad, I think like a lot of parents, my dad thinks education is very, very important. My dad has a BSc, an MBA, an LLM, and he's a CPA. I've got HBO, ADD, and a DUI. So. And he's proud of his 3 girls. He loves to brag about his daughters. He's like, hey, this is my oldest daughter, Shanti. She's a doctor. This is my daughter, Indu. She's a lawyer. This is my daughter, Vijay. She's adopted. Because at a young age, I knew that I was different from everybody in my family and different from most of the other Indian kids around me because I wanted to be a performer. And I was 10 when I told my dad my plan to become an actress, and he was like, act? You want to act? Okay, I will tell you how to act. You act like Albert Einstein and do your math homework. Good girl. Because to my dad, only math and science were really important. But I knew that I was destined for greatness, so I tried out for every play and musical at my all-white elementary school. I got my first break in the 4th grade. I was cast as Martin Luther King. Yes. But I'm wondering, how am I doing on time? I've got my buzzer. Am I okay? Okay, because there's a couple of things I want to talk about. Well, one thing I want to talk about is whenever we would travel, we would always go. My dad worked at the World Bank, and so every other summer we would get to go back to the home country. We'd get to go back to India, and whenever we were traveling, wherever we were, like we went to Egypt, we went to Japan, we went to France, and my dad would learn just a little bit of the local language just so he could ask this question, pardonnez-moi, où est McDonald? Because it was like we had to eat as much beef as we could en route to India, because once we got there, we couldn't reveal to any of our relatives that we had become these American beef-eating vampires or whatever they might think of us. And to me, McDonald's, in a weird way, represents home for me. And throughout my life, like wherever we went in the world, it was sort of that touchstone. And even when I started traveling by myself as a comedian and going to places like Beckley, West Virginia, where I was the only brown person probably in the entire state, I would look for a McDonald's because home for me meant safety, and I felt safe in a McDonald's, and so that's just, I wanted to link into what you were talking about. But I'm gonna wrap up. I've got like a minute left. So, but when I first started performing stand-up, I was terrified to tell my parents because it's not something that Indians really do. So I told my mom first because she's the nicer one. And she was like, don't worry, I'll handle daddy, no problem. 2 minutes later, my father is furious. He's like, Vijay, how can you do this to your family? I have struggled in this country for 25 years and you're going to disgrace me this way? And I'm like, Dad, I just want to be a comedian, make people laugh. And he said, oh, your mom told me you wanted to be a Canadian. So I'm going to end on that, and I'm going to hand it over to the latest.
Thank you very much, Vijay. Appreciate it. If we'd like now to ask the panel to come up and be seated on the specific panel chairs. And I would just like to give a brief introduction to each of the panel, and just starting with Sheldon, since he's just actually come from Dublin. Via Dublin from
London.
From London, yeah. Which was the nicest, London or Dublin?
Dublin, of course.
Thank you. Loaded question.
No question.
Sheldon was born in South Carolina and now lives in Washington, D.C. He's an artist, a writer, a sculptor, a storyteller, a man of many talents, the maybe the only Leonardo da Vinci type in the room.
Okay.
Is that right? And we appreciate very much him being part of this show and part of this exhibition, and I look forward to hearing, Sheldon, your ideas on home and what home means to you. Besides Sheldon on the left, who's also going to sing later on, is Elena Lacaya. Elena is from Managua in Nicaragua, went to school in Indiana, came to Washington, D.C., performs now as a full-time musician with Los Fulanos, and is just about to release a CD, I think, Elena. Yeah, so...
Wow. 1, 2. Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Well, so welcome to the panel, Elena, and welcome to our show. We also have... I was going to try Helen's second name in Lebanese as she spent 25 minutes outside in the lobby trying to coach me on. So I'll give it a shot, and then I'll give it the Irish way of saying it. So please welcome Helen Zugrab. No. Okay. Please welcome Helen Zugrabe. That's the Irish way of saying Helen's name. No? Helen, you do it.
Zugabe.
Zugabe. Helen Zugaib. Thank you, Helen. Helen was born in Beirut, in the Lebanon, and lived in the Middle East and lived in Europe before coming to the United States. She's primarily a painter. Her work is here in the exhibition. And Helen's work explores identity and is particularly concerned with Palestinians in the Middle East and Syria and what's happening to refugees.
Yeah, Arabs in general.
In general.
The Middle East.
And the
but
Middle
yeah,
East in general.
yeah.
So welcome to Helen.
Thank you.
And finally, Anna, I'm going to get this correct. Anna Sularakis. Sularakis.
Sorry.
Anna Sularakis.
We're good.
Anna works in sculpture, in installation, in video, and in performance. She's degrees from Dartmouth and from Yale. She's been living in DC, Anna, for how long?
In my 9th year.
In your 9th year in DC. Welcome to DC, and probably as the only person maybe in the room for whom and her people she can truly call the US as her real home. So, and the perspective, I think, of Native Americans is often overlooked as we discuss this question, so a particularly warm welcome to Anna. Thank you. I'm going to join the panel, but I would like to start with a general question, starting with yourself, Sheldon. When people ask you, where are you from? What do you think is the intention behind the question?
Well, is my mic on? I'll project until it comes on. There it goes. This is definitely what I would consider to be a bespoke interaction. It really depends on who's asking the question, contextualize it. I do like to spend a lot of time out of this country. I like traveling a lot. And oftentimes, in some regions of the world, when someone asks me where I'm from and I say that, I'm from America, from the United States, they say, no, where are you from?
That's right.
And particularly one time, I remember I was in Istanbul, and I think I had been asked that question maybe one time too many. And, my response was a brief explanation of American history. I explained to them how, my people were brought here and robbed of all identity. And, and I said to him, like, you see these other people who are walking down the street, coming from America with blue passports. And I said, it's very likely that my family has been in this country much longer than theirs. So you have to understand the challenge, and and I really used it as an opportunity to explain it because I do believe that honestly that they were ignorant of what that means. Like they kept on trying to ask me where I was from Africa, and I said, I don't have that privilege. I said, I know what you're asking me, but I don't have that privilege of being able to connect to my continental origins in Africa because I was robbed of all of that. And then to further explain to them that without any doubt. And without any question that I am just as American as everyone you see on TV, as everything else that you've been seeing portrayed, like I am just as American as anyone else. So yeah, so it really depends, But to back away from that a little bit, if someone asks me that now here in the United States, I tell people I'm from Washington, D.C., because it's been over 17 years. And if they're really interested about then I tell them about South Carolina. But that's about as far as I can go. I can't go any further than the Gullah Geechee Islands.
Gotcha. Thank you, Sheldon. Elena, for you.
Oh man, that's a question I ask myself every time someone asks me where I'm from. What I get is very white looking. But I'm from Nicaragua, and when I tell people that, they have a follow-up question that I find completely annoying in case you ever find yourself in this situation. But were you born there? And then I have to give them a history lesson about what was happening in the 80s in Nicaragua and how a lot of us weren't born there at that time. I think it's interesting because when people, when you say where you're from and then people challenge you to kind of prove that you are actually from there, I don't know. That's kind of what you were going through, but it's to me, it's a constant source of frustration because if you don't appear the way that people expect you to appear, though I'm sure most of the people that I talk to don't know any other Nicaraguans, but it can kind of get at you after a little bit. But I do ask that question a lot, like, what is the intention behind that? And also, like, if people say they're from a place, believe them.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know what to say.
Anna? Thank you, Elena.
It's really interesting because I think about that, and when people ask me where I'm from, I usually say, well, I live in DC, but I'm from New Mexico. And I don't think you will meet many Native Americans that live in DC that would honestly be proud of living here, because you have to have a reason. There has to be intention behind your choice to be in the home of colonialism in many ways. And so, I'm here because my husband works here, because I work here. And I purposely had all 3 of my kids in Oklahoma on Native lands because I couldn't bear the thought of them being born here. And so for me, that sense of home was so utterly important that for 3 times I drove, the 21 hours to Oklahoma to have them there, because that was where we both have family and everything. And so for me, it is so important that while my kids might be growing up here, they know exactly where they're from. They know their connections to tribal lands. They know their connections to Native peoples. And that is held in their hand as they're walking through the streets in DC. So that's kind of the first thing that's the way I always answer, is that I know where I live, but I also know where I'm from.
Thank you. Helen?
Wow, this is it's so interesting listening to your responses. And also, I'm thinking about my dad with your wonderful performance that you just delighted us with. So my father is born in Damascus. I know you're asking me, but I will go back to my dad and McDonald's. My dad is born in the old city in Damascus, and I remember we were traveling, they were in upstate New York, and we were driving back and forth from Washington to upstate New York, and it's a long drive, and my dad loved to stop at McDonald's. And so we stopped this one time, and we were standing in line with everybody, and somebody, an American, that's how I distinguish American, asked Daddy, where are you from? I am from New York. I am from Syracuse. And I was like looking at my dad like, that's not where you're from, Daddy. And they knew. They're like, we know you're not from there. They're asking for a different reason. Where is Daddy from? And I was just waiting, and Daddy just said, I am from Syracuse. And that was it. For me, it was really an interesting lesson. For me, this question became very upsetting to me after 9/11. I was here after 9/11. You want to call me Arab American, whatever, this is what's my label, which is fine, going with it. Several unpleasant, ugly things happened to me that week, including being spit on my face. And by the end, my husband, who is a Capitol Police officer, all hands on deck, he said, please, they were doing 15 hours a day. He said, can you call me? He said, can you please get a beer for me when I come home tonight? I had never bought a beer in my life. I bought wine, but I didn't buy beer. So I go to the local, our place, liquor store. They know us a lot. I say, I know my husband's been in there. I said, please, he wants a beer after this day. Can you direct me to what he wants to drink? I know what he likes. So she gets it. She's Korean. I'm standing there. An American comes to me after nasty stuff happened to me that week, and he looks at me, goes, where are you from? And all of a sudden, I just froze. And I thought, for the first time, I'm not saying where I'm from, because I know they don't want to know. They want to know why you look like you look. So I couldn't speak. And the Korean lady who's known us for a long time, she goes, she's from America. And I looked at her, and I said, yes, thank you. I'm from America. I am from America. So for a while after that, I didn't say anything. Why pretend I was Italian? I pretended I was Spanish, anything else but an Arab born. And now I'm like, I'm Arab American, and I'm proud.
Thank you. Helen.
Yeah,
Thank you, Helen.
sure.
So when I'm in Limerick in Castleconnell, I often find myself saying to my wife, "Well, when we go home to Washington," and then when I'm in Washington, I often find myself saying, "When we go home to Limerick."
Yeah.
So and I suppose I'm privileged in the sense that I have two homes, but I have no tribal. The only tribal identity I have here in Washington is the Nationals and the Redskins, right? But in Ireland, I'm connected to the nation and the people and its history. So I'm just wondering, for the panelists here, do you have this when I go home, or do you have one home or many homes, or what are your thoughts on that dichotomy?
Are you going in order? Or?
Just Elena. So,
I think I used to feel way more conflicted about this question than I do now. I mean, so I've been in, I guess maybe I do have two homes in the sense that I've been in DC for 11 years now and in the States for 15 years. But I think it's kind of like home is where you feel yourself, and there are parts of me, and this is why I do bilingual music, that are expressed here, and there are parts of me that are expressed there, and there are kind of reasons, different manifestations of myself, but it's almost like, I think in a lot of ways, like people have like these diverse identities, which I think is, more and more common every day. We feel like we don't have a home. I mean, that was my real feeling for a while, where I was like, I just don't feel like I fit anywhere. Like I don't, my whole self doesn't really fully fit in either one of these places that I've spent most of my time. But then I realized it didn't really matter. Like I was making a bigger thing of it than it was. And it's, when you sent us these prompts for these questions, I thought to myself, well, home, what the importance of home is actually more about identity, right? I mean, that's what we've been talking about. It's like people want to identify you. You want to identify with other people. You want to belong. But you can actually really play with that concept in the sense that, you're a unique person. You have a world of experiences inside of you through time and space. And really, it's kind of impossible to completely fit in anywhere anyway. So it's like, you kind of just, I think you have to, at least I have had to just kind of choose to be okay with grabbing the parts of me that I like from one and the parts of me that I like from the other, and being my best self, and also trying to improve the places where I am when I'm there. And it's kind of like the only thing you can be. So I've kind of like, I'm not stressed about that question anymore, I guess. I've kind of come to peace with it, because home is where I feel good,
Sheldon, thank you, Anna.
Yeah, no, I believe there are multiple homes. I mean, I feel like I'm a part of a global home, which is this space of humanity, which we sometimes get glimpses of. And then, I obviously have a national home, but just like most homes, like on the inside, there's a lot of tension. Like, I feel like the most tenuous relationship with home that I have is probably my national one, and rectifying myself and my place in this country, in this time. And, I have a home of origin, which is, the Gullah Geechee Islands and Pawleys Island, where I come to learn myself. And then I have a personal home. My name is Sheldon, so it's kind of funny, kind of like a turtle. But I carry my personal home with me wherever I go, and that helps to keep me grounded, no matter where I go in the world, because sometimes, even in the places where you're supposed to be home and welcome, you have to find shelter within those spaces. And that's true of every home that I've ever lived in. But I think that's probably the most powerful home, is the one that I carry with me, and the most important one. But I mean, I guess in that way I'm rich, and I have multiple homes, and I travel between them as often as I can.
Yeah, thank you, Sheldon. And it really struck me when he said that you drove 3 times, like 21 hours, so that your babies could be born in Oklahoma. And so I'm really interested in how you feel about the question of homes and home.
Well, I think just because you were talking about football, it made me think about that. And I obviously have a very
gonna say anything.
visceral reaction to that, the R word.
Yes.
And I think, unfortunately, that's why I can never see DC as home.
Yeah.
Because I know that a majority of people here right now don't respect that I even exist. And to know that that is possible, to know that I see a racial slur every single Sunday when I walk down the street, and that my 7-year-old daughter is learning how to read, and that she understands what that means. That it is not a word, I have to remind them, that is not a word we use with each other. That is not a word we ever, ever say to another Native American. The fact that is blasted all over TV, radio, everywhere, posters, the freaking tortilla chips at Giant, I mean, those kinds of things. I know that this will never be our home. And I grew up, my dad was a football coach, my brother played football. I wanted to play football so much I played rugby for Dartmouth. That's how much I love football.
What position?
I was a flinker.
Oh,
Good at tackling.
yeah.
But yeah, and so
Skill position.
yeah, I could take down a 300-pound woman like nobody's business. But yeah, so for me, football has been my life, and then to come to a place where it's just not a good place for that. But for me, when I think of home, I think of the place that I had my wedding in New Mexico. I think of the place that I'm going to be buried. And I think I'm very lucky because for us, because my husband's from Oklahoma and I have family there, we consider both Oklahoma and New Mexico our home. So our children think of Oklahoma as their home, but also New Mexico. And I just love the idea that they are able to link themselves and see themselves in both places. So in that way, I feel very lucky. And I hope maybe, DC will change its mind, so that's cool.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Thank you, Anna.
Yeah.
Ellen?
Wow, it's so interesting hearing you guys speak. So I thought when I looked at your questions, I was thinking today, and I counted the number of times that our family was forced to leave and left during my childhood before I turned 17. And we moved 9 times to 9 different countries, 1 year 4 different countries, and one year of my school from the war in Lebanon. And so when I came to America at 17, I had already had a lot of different homes. And when we were evacuated to Athens, and the school was not very accepting of us kids that came from Beirut. They made fun of us. Anytime a door is slammed, they had big doors. And a loud noise meant you hit the deck, kind of. And they would laugh at us, and kids would go underneath the desk when a big noise came. They made fun of us. Finally, I finished my schooling in Paris before I came to study art at Syracuse. And in Paris one night, my mom was saying goodnight to us and to me. And I said, Mom, where is our home? What is this? I didn't know. I was very unhappy. And she's Irish. She's your mom, who's that one. My mom is like that one where I go to talk to get to my dad. He says no, and I'm like, Mom. She's like, okay, I'll talk to your father. But my mom said, your home is where your family is. So I know what she was saying to me. But as we were talking about, there's so many other elements of home, what we think of home, how we feel accepted, are we welcomed, does our adopted home or new home embrace us? Now, Washington, D.C. is the longest place I've ever lived in my whole entire life. So, yeah, home, but if someone says, you're going to go home, I'm thinking Lebanon straight away. But do I fit in Lebanon? I'm not sure. I can't cross the streets like a native Lebanese because I'll be killed in the first second. My Arabic is, there are things. It's like this little foot here, foot there, everything that I'm hearing in you guys. It's making me feel good to talk to you guys. can say that.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much. Thank you. What we'll do now is we'll just take a small break in sense of I'll ask the panel to take a seat, and I'm going to ask Terence to come up. We're going to come back again, right?
Oh,
Just
I'm
let you know.
running
But take
to
a,
the seat.
but take a seat for a moment.
Great.
And I'll ask Terence to come up, and I'll introduce Terence. So Terence Winch is kind of a legend, to be honest with you. Irish American. His parents were from Ireland, born in the Bronx, and now has been living in the DC area for many years. He has, I suppose, spent a lifetime in many ways. Terence, you can come up, because I know you won't be blushing. He has spent a lifetime in writing and poetry and music, to some extent chronicling the experiences of a first-generation Irish American, both in New York and the connections back to Ireland. And through music and poetry and writing, he has established a body of work that is absolutely unbelievable. Tonight we're going to hear Terence in two ways. We will first see a video of a song he wrote called Bronx Childhood Ground, and he will tell you a little more about that, and we will play that video. And then after that, Terence will maybe perform one of the poems that he has written. And then we will go back to the panel, and then Terence and Elena Elena will perform then, and then right at the end, Terence and Elena will perform sequentially. But I would like you to give a big warm welcome to Terence Winch.
Thank you, Patty, and thanks for inviting me here tonight. So just by way of introduction to the song, and to the whole question of home, it's obviously from the discussion a complex issue, and it has been for me. And in many ways, my whole sense of home has been one of like loss of home and displacement, which I think a lot of people have experienced and felt. My brother Jesse, who's here tonight, reminded me of a line of mine in a story in which I said that I grew up homesick for a place I'd never seen. And that was true. My parents came over here in the 1920s, and they were poor immigrants who worked hard and supported their family. My father was a school custodian working for the Catholic school in our parish. And they didn't get back to Ireland for almost 30 years. I mean, back in those days, people didn't travel transatlantically the way they do now. And then what happened to our neighborhood, which back 50, 60 years ago was a very much an Irish immigrant neighborhood, where there were a number of sweeping changes, other immigrant groups moving in, et cetera. But one thing that happened in the late 50s and early 60s was the building of the Cross Bronx Expressway, which many of you have probably driven on over the years. But that was a terrible event in my boyhood that devastated my neighborhood and actually devastated and displaced hundreds of thousands, if not more, people in the Bronx. And it was simply imposed on the borough by the powers that be. So I actually wrote this song when my band, the original Celtic Thunder, was kind of disintegrating. So I didn't get around to recording it until last year when my son Michael and my brother Jesse and I did a recording. And this was on the recording, and the engineer really liked the song a lot, so he insisted we do a video of it. So what you'll see is the song interspersed with a lot of photographs, some of them family photographs, and some things I had to pull off the internet to sort of illustrate the song. And you'll also see the singer, who is a young woman named Eileen Estes, who's actually the daughter of our original lead singer in our band. So it's a nice sort of transgenerational thing. And you'll see my son Michael playing the fiddle on this. And it's called Childhood Ground. Thank you very much. I hope that wasn't too depressing. Patty asked me to read a poem, so I thought I'd read one from a book called Boy Drinkers, which is kind of about growing up Irish Catholic in New York. And I thought it would give a sense of kind of what that world was like to a teenager inside of it. So this is called Comfort. Father Ray Byrne quickly became a star. He played sports, danced, sang, told jokes. He was a man of the people, and we loved him for that. He came to our apartments and brought us comfort. He even came to a high school graduation party one night. I was a little drunk. Father Byrne came up to me and asked, "Are you thinking about it?" I panicked. What did he mean? Sex? Booze? Basketball? Could he read my mind? Then I realized his tone wasn't accusatory, so I said, "Yeah, I'm thinking about it," not having any idea what he was talking about. "That's great," he said. "I can always tell when a young man is thinking about it. Just let me know if I can be of any help." Now I was positive. He wasn't talking about sex or money or any of the things I actually did have on my mind. Father Byrne thought I might have a vocation. But I wasn't considering the priesthood. I didn't even think professional basketball was a possibility anymore. God had walked out the door about a year before, when I was 16, and never looked back, even though I begged him not to leave me alone and weeping in this valley of tears.
Thank you very much, Terry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just on Terence's poem there, when I went to a boarding school in County Cork, and to get into the boarding school, you had to have told, or your parents had to have told the head priest in this monastery that you had to have some idea that you were going to be a priest. So after a year anyway, I knew there was not a chance that I was going to be a priest. So I went up to the prior and I said, "Look, Father, there isn't a chance that I'm going to be a priest." And he looked around and he said, "Well, if you don't tell anybody, I won't either." So they let me stay for 4 years and let me have an education. The audience, I'd like to, at this stage, engage the audience in some of the questions and with the panel, and then we'll hear from Elena, and then we'll go back to the panel. So from folks in the audience, your thoughts on what you've heard so far, or any particular questions for the panel? Any observations you have, any feelings you have yourself about home and what is home and where is home? And if you would wait until you actually get a microphone, because you want to make sure we hear what you say.
I've thought a lot about this. I spent 20 years in the Air Force, and I grew up in a rural area, and you people are all urban. And let me tell you, urban and rural have a different view on the world. So I was aware that most people had two concepts of home. One is their place of origin, where they were children and learned their original culture and language. And two was where they domicile now, right now. And so I was aware that a lot of families that were in the military moved from station to station. You asked them where they're from, and they said, "I was a military child," which meant we moved every few years. So their sense of home was very different. When I was stationed in Egypt, one of my jobs was to talk with village elders. And village elders in Egypt were in villages which were thousands of years old. So their sense of home was a cultural sense. So it all depends on your perspective of what home was. So I think there's a historical one, that's where you grew up. One is, the other is where you're domiciled right now. So if I had asked anyone here where your home is, you would tell me where you're where you're living right now. If you said where would your home was, meaning your origin, and that was a different thing. But I think people have that dichotomy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So, there was someone up at the back, I thought. Was there? Yes, over, yes. Thank you. You're going to get fitness steps in this evening.
I guess I do have to say,
Yes.
though, like he mentioned that we were all urban.
Mm.
I'm not. I'm from the rural part of South Carolina. Grew up on an island called Pawleys Island.
Can you talk about that? Because I'm so fascinated by this culture within the U.S. that I don't know a lot about.
Yeah,
it.
most people don't even know.
Yeah,
that
it's really
we
cool.
Do exist. It's the descendants of enslaved Western Africans that were brought from probably was contemporary Senegambia area, brought here very specifically for our rice growing skills, we largely were settled and put to work in the coastal barrier islands off of South Carolina, the southern part of North Carolina, northern part of Georgia. And we were largely isolated because those lands were uninhabitable by native people and white people because of swamp, what do you call it? The mosquitoes, malaria.
Yeah.
And because we had the sickle cell trait, it made us immune to malaria. And what most people don't realize is like South Carolina was, while being the richest state in the South and the second richest state in the Union behind Massachusetts, was 95 to 98% enslaved Africans. So all that money, all that technology was that of the Gullah Geechee people who were there for a very particular reason. And people oftentimes, when I get excited and my accent comes out, they think that I'm from further down the diaspora. People don't really realize that I'm actually, a continental American because they think I'm from, you're from one of those West Indian islands. And West Indian people do that as well too. But, the reality is that, we grew up in that space, and it was because we were isolated, we were able to stay in much closer contact than what was happening on the continent. And we also were in and around Charleston, which was the major port for the transatlantic trade. So, we were constantly getting these reminders from the continent about like who we were and what we were. But yeah, this experience that I've been having for the last 17 years living in Washington, D.C. is certainly not my origins.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a kind of different perception of the word home that came to me when we were talking tonight. My father and mother were both born in Ireland, so I'm a first generation. And his family, there were 14 siblings. Only 2 of them came to Ireland, to the US rather. So I've been back and forth through Ireland quite a lot. And almost all my cousins are Irish born, and most of them live there. And whenever they greet me, even now, they say, "Welcome home, Michael." And I'm kind of flattered that they say that, because I don't think of Ireland as my home, but I think that I've sort of been accepted as that. And there's the other odd thing that growing up, I never felt American completely. I was half Irish. And when I go to Ireland, I don't feel Irish completely. So it's that mixed home.
It's interesting in the in the Celtic tribes, like the old Celtic tribes, leaving home, leaving your kin, leaving your place was such a big deal that there was a set of protocols you had to go through. So the first thing you had to do, you had to ask permission of the chief of the tribe to talk to the community about your leaving. And you had to do certain things, including you had to thank your mother for birth. You had to thank the community for nurturing you. You had to thank the elders for their wisdom. You had to tell them why you were leaving, and you had to tell them if you had intentions or not of coming back. And in theory, if they said no, you couldn't leave. Most of the times they said okay, but it was such a big deal to leave. It was such a big deal to leave that in the Celtic peoples you had to go through those protocols.
There's also in the Arab culture too, even till now, contemporaries of me, when they go on a trip, even just to maybe from Detroit to California, they tell everybody, they make amends with everybody before they go. In case something happens, they pay their respects, say thank you. Love maybe is not the right word, but they express their gratitude and in a way their blessing before they go on their trip.
Yes.
Not everyone does it, but this is very traditional to do.
Yes.
Same kind of thing.
Yes,
It's very
yes, yes,
interesting.
yes.
Yeah.
Someone else in the audience?
Well, I do want to add to that.
Yeah.
I was in South Africa last year, and I got a lot of welcome homes that totally
Nice.
surprised me. Like I had never, obviously I've never felt deeply connected to the continent for a number of reasons, but really didn't expect that. But that was the overall sentiment, because when people there asked me where I was from, told them I was America, they would respond with "Welcome home."
Yeah.
Which was, particularly South Africa, like in
Yes.
Johannesburg and Soweto and some of the townships we visited. It was really this connective cultural tissue that was there and still vibrant and alive that I really didn't expect. So I definitely, and it felt very complimentary,
Yes.
and I don't know if I had done anything to deserve it. I still don't know, but I imagine that's what it feels like to go home to Ireland and people say that,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's part of that global home.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, please.
Hello, I'm Rex Tardy. I'm the artistic director of the theater program here at Solas Nua, but I grew up in Oklahoma, yay. And I wanted to ask the panel about finding an artistic home, because when people talk about, where I've been in DC about 10 years, just over 10 years, working in theater here, and there's not much of a theater scene in Oklahoma, and I always say, well, if you want to be a theater artist and you're in Oklahoma, you have to pick left or right, like go to one of the coasts. And I've, although I grew up in Oklahoma, I identify as an artist, and I struggled with finding my home as an artist in Oklahoma City, is where I grew up. So I just wonder for the panel of how do you find an artistic home that might be different from your place of birth?
I'll ask a fellow Oklahoman to go first.
So I was born in Kansas, but I have family in Oklahoma. I would say for me, it was an interesting road to kind of get where I am in terms of understanding where I was artistically, because my dad's an artist and he's half Navajo and half Greek, and he makes traditional Navajo jewelry. And so I grew up, my whole life around other Native artists, and I was always interested in what they were making and seeing what people were doing, and just like enthralled. We'd always go to these different art markets and everything. And then it was when I went to college that I really started to see how the trajectories of different types of art were going in different ways, like, Latin American art, African American art, Asian American art, doing like video installation, all these things. And, I was coming through in the late 90s, and I was like, where is this for Native art? Like, I was seeing a few smatterings like here and there, but I was like, where's our huge branch? And I wasn't seeing it. And that's when I knew that that's what I needed to do. And I knew, that at that time, specifically in Dartmouth, that there was nobody else around me. And I always had this dream that I was going to move to New York, and I was going to meet these other Native artists, and we were going to write a manifesto, and we were going to freaking rock the world, and it was going to be awesome. And I moved to New York, and they were not around at all. And I realized that I was on my own in a lot of ways because of the type of work that I was making. And when I was coming up in the early 2000s, I was one of the few Native women artists that was using video and doing performance art. And I realized that I didn't have that community like other people had it. To this day, I don't have that community. I know of no other contemporary Native artist working in DC, in the whole DMV area, in the closest 500 miles probably. And so I have to own that, and I have to understand that, and that, I'm not speaking for all Natives, I'm speaking for myself, but I take pride in that, and I think that kind of relates to this whole idea that DC isn't my home, You know, I may have lived here for 9 years, but it'll never be my home. And for me, that artistic home is just wherever I'm making art at the time, but not, and that's, you know, all over the place. Like this next weekend, I'm going to Brooklyn. A couple weeks ago, I was in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. But yeah, I don't have that luxury that pretty much everyone else in this room has, to know that there are other people like you within a 1 block radius.
You know, I
Thank you,
could
Anna.
just say something about that too. As an Arab American, I share a lot of what you, but we even have a bigger community than you. But you know what? It's really, I have to say, after 9/11, that the Americans were like, oh, well, you know, what happened? Oh, well, we better pay attention to the Middle East now. So I think what happened after 9/11, I keep going back to that, but then what happened was a stereotyping and a generalization of what is an Arab American, pretty negative. And so then when we start to make our artistic home, to answer your question, is like, well, we don't want the media telling you who we are. So we're gonna say who we are. We tell you who we are. We tell you our stories of everything. We're all the same. It's all, we could be a tribe in Ireland. You know, it's all the same, but we're going to express, you're not going to tell us who we are and what we represent. So we will, and I'm a visual artist, so I try and do it through my work to get across what I want you to know about me or my family, or in a more general sense about the Arabs. Yeah, I'm just throwing that out there, but it's a good question.
Yeah, I'm a little confused what you mean by artistic home. I think, I mean, this is my home and I'm an artist in it, but I also don't have a community of bilingual.
No.
Like no one does bilingual music
Yeah.
in Washington D.C. The way, like to the there's some in L.A. is really where like it's all really based, but in this geographic region, in terms of doing music that is both American and Latino at the same time, kind of like trying to tie those things together, because there's so many of us who are like fully bicultural. We go home, we speak Spanish to our parents, we go to school, we speak English, you know, and then people are like, well, who am I and what should I be speaking and what should I be doing? And kind of like the mission of what my group tries to do is to show like you can do both of these things and they're not in conflict with one another,
Mm-hmm.
and that's actually really great.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like there is a movement in the U.S., unfortunately, of intolerance where they think that if you learn a different language, the English falls out of your brain somehow, and it's like they don't see this as a value add, even though it really is. Like being multicultural is really rad, really dynamic, and it's like really the future, I think, of this country. You know.
Sheldon, thank you, Elena. Any thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. I guess, you know, Washington, D.C. is my artistic home. It's, you know, I didn't move here with the city without ambitions. I came from a completely different world. I was a sex offender therapist when I first moved here, and just found my way into like the artistic and cultural fabric of the city, which I think largely through art. And you know, it's been wonderful being a part of a process, watching that fabric get stronger and grow and grow. And, you know, watching people like Vijay, who is a part of my artistic family. My first artistic expression was storytelling, and Vijay and I met at what was then Speakeasy DC now, which is now Story District, which we've seen grow exponentially. And like, you know, and Jacqueline, you know, I figured the reason that I'm probably here now is because I curated Jacqueline into a show that I curated that was around home, and she turned around, and this is how those communities get built. So for me, it really is, and I think, you know, for an artist in the city, there's always this push to go somewhere else. But I can definitely say, you know, time and time again, every time I go to New York or LA or all these other places, I never feel that pull. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and what a pull I do feel, the gravity always brings me back to here. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the particular reasons for that is because I live in a space where the dominant narrative, you know, the white cisgender narrative is not so burdensome here in Washington, D.C. You know, I can fully express myself without questions as a black gay man and not have to worry about defending that, and then be along on the stage with people of multicultural identities, native peoples, people who are from different parts of the world than I. And I think that that's an interesting fabric to be a part of as an artist, because like, you know, we all motivate each other. And I think particularly when you're pushing against a dominant narrative, it's good to build that kind of family. So I'm home.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. I just, except for Elena, I'd ask the rest to go back for a moment, and we're now going to hear some songs from Elena.
Okay.
And when Elena is finished hers, we will have another exchange between the audience and the panel, and then we'll finish up with Terence and Elena. And your music is, a lot of it is about identity, Elena. Would that be
Yes,
exploring the different from tours?
Is that on? Is that coming through?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Is that right? So your music is exploring kind of lives in two worlds. It's English, it's Latino, and it's folk and rock.
Yeah, I do English and Spanish. I mean, I'm basically an original, singer-songwriter, and I decided when I first started reading music, I just kind of started writing songs in English and songs in Spanish. And then I was like, well, what am I going to do with this? And then I was like, well, I can be an artist who does those two things. I mean, it's bilingual music is kind of a growing, but it's not that big of a scene. I mean, it's like Gloria Estefan. I don't know. I can't think of anybody before that who did stuff like that. So I started my project, Elena Los Fulanos, and so should I do a couple songs?
Sure.
So this first song that I'm going to do is in Spanish, and it is about, so when I moved to DC, I came to work on immigration advocacy, and I did that for 6 years until I decided to focus on music. And so I wrote this song. It's from the perspective of an immigrant mother. I'm not a mother, but in working on immigration, I got to hear all the stories from people who would come and be separated from their families. And so this song I wrote it's kind of like a love song from a mother to her son who she's left behind in her home country, and in order to give her son a better life, but in doing so is separated for her son for many years. We actually have a music video, and I only bring that up because we were actually able to showcase the story of an immigrant mother from Maryland who hasn't seen her son in 12 years. So 13 now, actually. So this one's called Amor Migrante. Yo te amo de lejos, aunque no lo puedas sentir. Dejé el nombre en mi patria, con tu adiós, qué triste sufrir. Quiero darte razones. Por mis grandes traiciones, por ti me fui, de ahí te di, por ti me fui, de ahí te di, por ti me fui, de ahí te di, por ti me vine aquí. Hey. Con tristeza en el alma, a frontera norte corrí. Ya creciste sin mamá y te harás gran hombre sin mí. Ay, de pedir tus perdones. Por mis grandes traiciones, por ti me fui, de ahí te di, por ti me fui, de ahí te di, por ti me fui. de sacarte de pobre. Por ti me fui, de ahí te di. Por ti me fui, de ahí te di. Por ti me fui, de ahí te di. Por ti me vine aquí. Por ti me fui, de ahí te di. Por ti me fui, de ahí te di. Que lo sufrí estar lejos de ti. Por ti me vine aquí. Hey. Thank you. And I'll do one in English. So, when I perform with my band, we do songs in English and in Spanish. And I like to introduce this one as my American side. It's a little country number I wrote when I first bought this guitar. Bought this guitar in North Carolina. And her name is Carolina. And this song is named for that state. Oh, I gave away that it was North. Sorry, Sheldon. I try to leave it open-ended so South Carolinians don't get offended. Oh, my mother always cared for Carolina. Said it always was a place she'd like to see. As I look to my reflection and her staring back at me, I know I'm going to Carolina in the spring. Oh, the wind, it brushes softly on my window, and the rain, it brings a drop right to my cheek. And it always gets so cold here, and that's why I gotta leave. Because I'm going to Carolina, and that's where I wanna be. And I'm going to Carolina in the spring. Ooh, come with me. Ooh, come with me. So the time has come for me to make my way now. Hear her singing in the distance, soft and sweet. And I know I'm gonna miss you, so you should come with me. Because I'm going to Carolina, and that's where my heart is free. And I'm going to Carolina in the spring. Because I'm going to Carolina, and I hear her calling me. And I'm going to Carolina in the spring. Thank you.
Just want to maybe just discuss a little bit between the audience, just the idea of home / returning home to wherever that home is, and the reactions of people who are at home to you. So when I'm lucky enough now to spend several months of the year in Ireland, and still every day I'm asked, what's it like to be at home? And they almost get offended in Ireland when I say, well, you know, Washington is home too. And they can't get that, no, you're at home, so like, how better is it here than in Washington at home? And there's kind of a little pressure to say it's much better here in Ireland than it is in Washington, D.C. And sometimes I succumb to the pressure, and then they say, and you must be delighted to be out of Washington with the new president and all this. So I would like to just from the audience perspective, those who have go back and visit, etc., do you get that question? And to the people on the panel,
Yes.
you get the question. And what's your response?
How much
Aline?
better is it?
Yes.
People often are like, it's not like the same way. I think it's just like a cultural difference, but the way people, they just like to give you a hard time for having left. So they're like, oh, you stayed, didn't you? You're gonna stay. They like try to predict. You just ended up staying now, right? Like, and I'm like, maybe, but why do I gotta choose like that? I mean, I think that it's interesting. I mean, I'm thinking right now about my grandfather. So my grandparents, my parents are from Nicaragua, but my grandfather actually studied in San Francisco. He became a dentist there around the Depression, and my mother went to college there as well because he knew they knew the area. And I think about what it is to have left when my grandfather used to have to take a boat from Nicaragua up to San Francisco, and how different it is for me now that I get to fly. And Nicaragua's not that far, by the way. It's as far, probably Oklahoma, New Mexico is like just as far, if you don't get a direct flight. But also it's like we are so connected now that it almost like you do choose where you are physically, but you don't, those relationships and a lot of the culture and a lot of that stuff is stuff that you can access sometimes in other places. I mean, it really depends, right? But that's part of the reason that I do Latin music here. It has a different significance for me to sing in Spanish in DC or in the US than it is to sing in Spanish in Nicaragua, or, you know what I mean? So it just, I feel the dichotomy isn't as strong as maybe it once was, you know? Like, I feel like I'm very connected to my family. I can talk to them. I can FaceTime with them. I can see them in a way that, like, you know, when my grandfather left, he would write letter. You know, he would leave for years at a time. So I think, like, I don't know. I just don't think it's as stark as it used to be. At least for me, I don't have time change, though, so. I'm privileged.
You know, I can say a funny little anecdote. Mention I was from Lebanon, and my cousins who had to come to America also because of the war, they would have probably studied in Lebanon at the American University, but they were sent to America to come to study at Syracuse where my father was. So he was like their father, and my family was their home. And to look after them and take care of them, this extended family or tribe, as you refer to, I like. And my cousin, Iser, came. He was the first cousin to come from the war to America to study at Syracuse. And he came, and my mother, my American mom, was many times in charge of him, showing him America. He had never been to America. They had a place in upstate New York, and when they grow the corn, you can just pass by the corn stand, and it's the honor system, and you just put the money and take your corn. My cousin, as a good Lebanese, had never seen that in his life. He's like, Tante Georgia, they let you just put the money and take it. They believe you? She's like, this is America. All these little things. And he kept saying, finally, she would say, Iser, this is how it is in America. He goes, Tante Georgia, it's better in Lebanon. Everything was better. Anything she presented to my cousin, it was better in Lebanon. Finally, she taught him, she's like, Iser, why don't you just say it's different? It's different in America. Lebanon is different than America. That's all you have to, you don't have to say Lebanon is better than America. He said, okay, Tante Georgia, I will say it's not bad. So finally, so she would present him vanilla ice cream. It's better in Lebanon. Then he would say, okay, Tante, it's not bad. So upon his graduation from university, my mom made him a cake. And she had it written. She said, not bad, Iser, not bad. Kind of sums it up, you know, yeah.
Anna, for you?
I think it's a bit different, I guess, when I think about it. You know, my family's from the Navajo reservation, and I grew up on and off the reservation, but spent most of my time before I went off to college off reservation. And it was a place that most people in the U.S. never get to experience, where my family didn't have running water or electricity, not by choice, but because they weren't participants when the power grids were built. They weren't part of those state talks and the federal talks. And so my family, my extended family, never got running water, electricity until less than 10 years ago. They still have no potable water, and this is the U.S. currently. No, if we have to haul in water for my grandparents. Like, it's just, it's abysmal to think that that's the way people live still, not by choice, but because that's the, land that we've lived on, since time immemorial. And so that's kind of what I grew up away from. So my dad pulled us away so we could get an education, so we could grow up in a different way than he had grown up. And so every time I went home, it was very cultural. It was about ceremony. It was about reconnecting with family. And I mean, I absolutely loved it, to go back every time. But I always was so grateful because I knew, unlike all of my family, that wasn't my complete life. And how lucky I was that my dad understood what education was about. And so when I went off to Dartmouth, I'm the first one in my family to go to four-year college. Out of, all Native Americans, only 5% graduate from a four-year college. Of that 5%, only 5% graduate with a master's degree. And of that 5%, only 1% graduate with a PhD. And so education is a rarity. It is an extreme privilege. And I feel so lucky that I was able to experience that, and I was able to even consider the thought that I could and I don't want to say get away, but go further. But because I did that, I'm the oddball. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's Anna. She does that.
Yeah.
I'm the one that traveled, backpacked through Europe when I was 19, that has lived abroad, that married a guy from Oklahoma. And so I am a rarity. And while I wish, when I go home, they don't say, oh, when are you coming back? Because they just know I'm just different than everyone else. And I've learned to really embrace that. And I've always kind of known it, that I was different. The art I make is that crazy art. And so I don't know, like it's a different sense of most people that I'm around, but I've come, to complete terms with it. And I think, it was a bit hard. My dad is the one that I kind of seek the most approval from and that I'm closest with. And I think when I went to graduate school, he was like, wow, so these people really like what you're doing. And I think that was the moment where he understood that this was my path and fully supported me and has helped me build, my random installations all over the country. And so I think it's a bit different, but I'm really content.
Very good. Any observations or questions from the audience or the panel?
I have a question. It's really convenient that I have a microphone. Okay, can you hear me? Okay. Thank you for that. I was going to ask, my question earlier was, I am in a similar situation, and only that I'm one of the first in my family to go to college, and I'm from a small town in Arizona, and every time I go back, I started as an exchange student in Taiwan, then I moved to China, moved to New York, and now I'm part of NYU's program here. And every time I go back to a party with the people I've grown up with, I'm always the China girl. And they're like, when are you going back to China? And it's funny, but a lot of my friends now, I'm 22, I'm going to 4 weddings next summer. They're all getting married. A lot of them have kids. I tell my friends in New York or DC this, and they're just like, what? It's so normal where I'm from. And so it's this weird dichotomy of self where you're constantly kind of explaining, or in my case, being from Arizona, sometimes defending or needing to explain or quasi-educate, and then you sound pretentious when you're trying to be like, you can't say that word, or you can't, that's maybe not politically correct, because I've been given this privilege of living all over the place. Yeah. And so I was curious how you deal with conflict, which is something that I'm constantly running into, because it's difficult being that person in the middle. It's a very weird time politically, and yeah, it's politically very strange in the U.S. And how do you deal with conflicting opinions of people that you really care about, but very different perceptions of the world?
Sheldon?
Aer Lingus gives a lot of water on the flights. So I had to take a little break, sorry. Those Irish Airlines. But like, this otherness, again, it's like, this idea of having your own personal home that you take with you at all time. And for me, that's the source when I run into these spaces where, someplace incredibly important and powerful to me and that is filled with people that I love dearly poses as a threat to my identity or identity of the other people that I love who they may not know.
I would say that like the more marginalized that your identity is, the more used to conflict, or the more that kind of conflict is a part of your life. And so I think in a lot of ways, like, I think it's important to keep that in perspective about like how you haven't experienced this until now, and how to be best kind of like allied with the people that you kind of have values with. And then, I think it's hard. It's hard to be in like a divisive space. But the most important thing is to like know who you are and what you believe in, and not to try to create conflict out of nothing. But also, it's a hard balance, but you kind of have to just like, I don't know, I'm not being very eloquent, but I think that in these times, more people are finding themselves in this divisive space because divisiveness is like kind of like the circle of where divisiveness happens has grown. Does that make sense to people? Mm-hmm. People understand? So I think in a lot of ways, what's made me think about is the fact that I haven't had to deal with this, but there are communities that maybe, as a woman, I feel like I've had to deal with that, but I'm a very white-looking person, so I've never gotten discriminated against for the color of my skin. It's an important thing to take this moment to realize that that's not something I have to deal with. Like, I don't live in a city that has a slur for the kinds of people where I come from, and that's a privilege that. So I think that's, to me, that's what I take from it. I don't know.
There's I think it was Proust, someone who said that discovery is not seeing new sights, it's seeing things through new eyes.
Yeah.
And there's another saying like this: when you change the way you see things, the things you see change.
Yeah.
So one of the things that happened is that living here for so long, I have changed a lot. So when I go back, I have moved maybe a little lefter, and it's not that my brothers and sisters have moved righter. They've stayed kind of where they are, but it seems they've moved. So we have pretty intense arguments. And so when you only go back for a week or two, I used to find I was on my best behavior. You didn't want to fight with anyone because you didn't have time to work it out, and you didn't leave bad feelings, and and they were on their best behavior, and it was still a lovely visit, but we were all on our best behavior. But now we've roused because I'm there for 6 months, and the differences appear. And one of the things I find is that as I've grown older away from home, my Irish home, if you like, my views have intensified about my understanding of right or wrong or good or bad. And my brothers and sisters are equally intense, and part of me saying, well, how dare you? And so we have these so for me, the trick of the difficulty of arguments and discussions and differences is that in Ireland, we used to have such intense rows in pubs that the first thing we'd do in the morning would call each other up and say, who do I need to apologize to? Because we didn't know it, we'd get lost in it. But in America, I couldn't have that for some reason. I can't really find people in the States to have an intense personal argument with and still be great friends in the morning. It's very difficult. So that was just my experience with it. I don't know about Anna or Helen, but.
I was just going to say to kind of about your friends that are getting married. When I went back, I remember I flew into Albuquerque because a grandmother of mine was in the hospital. So I'm in this room full of like 15 women from my family, right? My grandma's like on her deathbed. And so one aunt walks over. I was 28 at the time, and she goes, so I guess you're not having any kids, right? Because I wasn't married. And so like, I understand that kind of like, you know, my cousins who had 3 kids by the time they were 21, those kind of expectations that they have of you and how you don't meet them sometimes, and that's okay. Yeah, completely okay. And so I don't know. I think for me, one way that I think about like the first time I went to Africa a few times, and the first time I went, my family was really scared because nobody in our family had ever been to Africa, and it was like this complete. I mean, it was like outer space to them. And I remember I came back from with small gifts, everything from a postcard to a rock or something like that. And I was able to tell these stories to them about, this is what I got for you because this is what I was thinking about. And I know it's kind of like, you know, it's small, but this idea that they had a connection to these places. And once I started doing that, I kept doing that. And it was really hard because my suitcase got bigger and bigger. But I think like now my family and my connections, even if they don't believe in what I'm doing or why I'm going to the places I'm going, they see a connection to those places, and it's like they have an extension there. And I've heard them talk about, you know, to other people about how like, oh, you know, Germany, oh, Anna went there and she brought us back some, you know, whatever.
You're connecting them.
Yes, and I think that is that it might not, because you're young, it might not be like that right now, but eventually people are gonna see that, and you're gonna be that arm that's reaching for them all over the place. And that's exciting and just awesome.
Final, anything to say on this,
A
Helen?
final word on me?
Yes, from you, yes.
You know, about having babies. I say, no. So I don't have any. Okay, one little quick story. Okay, my uncle, he, honestly, I don't know what it was. He nearly died in the hospital, and we were all there. The tradition in the Arab world is also Middle East. Everyone crams in the hospital room. For any reason, you're just all jammed in there. And my mom refused to go, but we were all in there. And all of a sudden, a doctor comes in, and he says to my uncle, we don't know what happened, but you're okay. You're not going to have this operation. We've never seen anything. I mean, really, it was like this weird miracle. So my uncle sits up in the bed, and now he's going to get out his best cigars and the finest bottle of wine and have a big celebration. And then he looks at me, and I'm sitting there looking at my uncle. And he's sitting across in the bed, and his wife is there, and all of us. Oh, we're all sitting there. Daddy's there, I'm here. And also, too, in Arabic, I say uncle, which is ammu in Arabic. He tells it to me back. So he calls me ammu. So he looks at me, he goes, ammu. He's calling me uncle. It's like a love name. I said, yes, ammu. He goes, why you don't have a baby? Like that. I'm like, my uncle just nearly died, and now we're talking. I'm like, Ammo, I'm an artist. He's like, never mind. You put the baby in a basket beside you, and you paint, no problem. And his wife, who has 4 of them, she goes, Raymond, no, it's not going to happen, like that. So, you know what? The baby doesn't stay. The baby grows up. I went and told my mom. She's like, doesn't Uncle Raymond think the baby grows up and goes and like acts really bad? You know, so I say stick to your guns.
I would like we're going to close with a poem from Terence and another song from Elena. But I would like to thank Helen and Anna and Sheldon and Elena as a panelist for your conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
I'll read 2 short poems, actually. And staying with the kind of religious theme, I'll do one called Forgiveness. Father Kahir kept us holy. He smoked cigars in the confessional. He had a distracted air about him, as though he wasn't sure what he was supposed to do next. I don't remember what he taught. History, probably. It was his liberal attitude as a confessor that made him a legend. No matter what you confessed to, he always barked out the same penance. 3 Hail Marys and a good act of contrition. Next. So we tested this leniency, confessing to rape, murder, burglary. Kahir paid no attention. He knew we were a bunch of high school punks. Puffing his cigar, he'd issue his standard penance and absolve all sins, real or imagined, with godlike aloofness, his vast indifference to, or total acceptance of, the darkness within the human soul, exactly how I hope the deity regards us. Take forgiveness any way you can get it. And I'll finish with a poem. This was a great panel here tonight, and I loved hearing everybody's different stories. In the world I grew up in, my parents seemed to me, looking back especially, to be really unusual people in that they were very tolerant. They didn't have a lot of the more backward and sometimes intolerant attitudes of their peers, and we were, not allowed to use pejorative language about other people, et cetera, in our house, which was pretty unusual in those days in the Bronx. So she died when I was 16, and a lot of my work over the years has kind of centered around the ongoing reaction to that unhappy event. So this is the last poem in a book called Irish Musicians, American Friends, and it's called It Takes All Kinds, which was sort of her motto. We lived one flight up in our apartment building, and whenever someone would ring the downstairs bell, my mother would tell us to stay put. She would say, if they want to see us bad enough, they can walk up the flight. My brother Kevin used to tell me to never answer the phone if I was eating. My father always told us not to worry too much about money. He would say, money won't buy you happiness. My mother would always occasionally remark, it takes all kinds. Thank you.
Would you all humor me in singing along a little bit to a song? You think so? Maybe? It's kind of a quiet crowd, but we'll figure it out. Okay, it's in Spanish, okay? So this song, I wrote it recently, it's basically about, it was mostly started from a place of, I grew up in Nicaragua, and now I live in the States. I think I live here for the most part because I'm a woman, and because in Nicaragua, there's just like not as many opportunities, or there's like a lot of machismo that keeps you from being able to do things as a woman. And so when the elections were happening, I felt a lot of that coming back. And so I started this song. It kind of just became this bigger justice song. So it goes like this. It's very easy. What the part that you say is a eso, which is to that. So a eso. And it's ponle fin, pon fin. And you say a eso, ponle fin, pon fin. A eso, ponle fin, pon fin. A eso, ponle fin, pon fin. Pretty good. All right, cool. I'm going to do the song. Y'all maybe will sing with me, and then it'll be cool. Sound good? Okay, cool. Yeah, it's about, we're saying like put an end and then, and you say to that. And it's all about all those injustices we're fighting. Okay, cool. Las mujeres les dice que sean buenas, que se ajusten, que se aguanten. A las mujeres les dice que sean lindas, que sean dulces, no se amarguen. A los hombres les dice que sean firmes, que sean duros, que maltraten. Yo no puedo aceptar esas cosas, yo no suelo conformarme. Y'all ready? You remember it? Maybe? Y dice, ponle fin, pon fin, a eso ponle fin, pon fin, a eso ponle fin, pon fin, a eso ponle fin, pon fin. Todos juntos, ponle fin, pon fin, ponle fin, pon fin, a eso ponle fin, pon fin, a eso ponle fin, pon fin. Hay Hay personas que quieren decirte a quienes tú puedes amar. Y después te llaman pecadores por quererte bien casar. Inmigrantes viven con horror que los vengan a deportar. Y los negros de la policía que los suelen fácil matar. Here it comes again. You ready? Ponle fin, pon fin a eso, ponle fin, pon fin a eso, ponle fin, pon fin a eso, ponle fin, pon fin. Como dice, ponle fin, pon fin a eso, ponle fin, pon fin a eso, ponle fin, pon fin a eso, ponle fin, pon fin. No a el machismo, no a la explotación, no a la homofobia, no te digo no, no a la intolerancia, no a la deportación, no a el racismo, no te digo no, no a el machismo, no a la explotación, no a la homofobia, no te digo no. No a la intolerancia, no a la deportación, no a el racismo, no a Donald Trump. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elena. Just some thanks before we leave. First of all, to Lauren Hunt. Is Lauren still here? Yeah, she's been here since the crack of dawn. Laura and all the staff at NYU, but particularly on tonight, Laura and your helpers for the extra effort you put in and the improvisation and with not just what you did, but with the style and the grace with which you do things, which is wonderful. Thank you very much, Lauren. To Jackie Hoisted, curator of visual arts for Solas Nua, whose idea this whole exhibition and program was, and for conceiving of it and executing it and curating it. Thank you very much, Jackie. To Dennis Houlihan, the president of Solas Nua, who to make something like this exhibition happen, countless details, administrative work, problems to be solved, things to be done behind the scenes that no one sees. Dennis, thank you so much. To you lads for coming. You know, there's a lad who the audience creates the experience, the pupil creates the teacher, the child creates the parent for creating a lovely experience and helping us do it. To you lads tonight. And finally, to the panel again, which I've thanked, but to Terence and to Michael. Michael, by the way, is Terence's son. And so for playing up there tonight, Michael, thanks so much. Terence, for your work. And for Jesse also, who had to leave. I hope you enjoyed the evening. I suppose for an Irish person, you know, my dad used to say, it's not so much that there's no place like home, but there's no home like place. And so for me, and for coming from a large family, an extended family with over 30 nieces and nephews, who go back in my place many, many, many years, and when you look at the television and you see the hurt and the pain of migrating people who have been dislocated from their homes, and for whom, as I think it was Helen who said earlier, like, where is my home? So I feel privileged that I have two homes. And the trees and the streams and the rocks of Castleconnell are not in Washington, but there's Irving Liquor Store, and there's, you know, Flying Fish Coffee Shop, and I have as many friends, if not more friends in Washington than I have in Ireland because I've spent more time here. But it's a question, I think, that's going to keep pursuing us, and it's a question that needs new questions because the answers we have aren't adequate right now. And I think, if anything, if we leave here tonight, coming up with new questions to provoke maybe channels of new answers, then we've had a good night. For staying and for engaging and for talking, thank you very much and have a good, and as we say in Ireland, safe home or slán a bhaile. Take care.